Hello friends, welcome. Friends, I was looking at this headline and I went through it. It talks about US reciprocal tariff strategy to move electronics from China to India. So the argument in this article is, and I'll go straight to this paragraph, we are saying that we are optimistic that a well-structured bilateral trade agreement between the two will materialize. If it is done right, this could propel India's electronic export to US from 10 billion to 80 billion by 2030, which is an 800% surge, said Pankaj Mahendru, chairman of ICA. Now, friends, the purpose of this article, purpose of this video is to deep dive and do some analysis. Whether we are going to achieve this and what are the other conditions which have to be fulfilled in order for us to achieve this target, which is being talked about in this paragraph. Now, before we go into deep dive on this number, let's lay out the foundation of this discussion. Now, what is going on? We are currently facing a tariff war. The world is currently being in the grip of a tariff war, which has been triggered by US. The new president wants tariff to be a leverage point to move manufacturing back to US. So what it has done is it has imposed a tariff of 10 to 15%, I think 10 to 15% on China, so that the Chinese export to US will become costlier by that amount. China has retaliated with 15% tariff and will make US imports to China more costly. Now, India also has got certain tariff structure on products, especially since we are talking about electronics and smartphone, it imposes a duty of 16.5% basic custom duty on smartphone for all countries where we don't have free trade agreement. So US also falls under that bracket of 16.5% basic custom duty. Now, US imposes a custom duty of 0.4%. So what US is saying is that there are many other items to be discussed. I'm only focusing on smartphone here because that is the article all about. So US is saying that because we have a 0.4% duty on Indian export, so we will like our smartphones duty to be brought at par with 0.4%. So the idea is to bring this at par. So whatever India imposes, if India imposes 16.5% duty, we will also impose. US will also impose 16.5% duty. So all our exports currently to US, which is currently being $10 billion, will have to bear the cost of 16.5% duty. Now you got what the point of discussion is. Now, if you are going to bring it to 0.4%, then what will happen is our exports to US is going to jump from $10 billion to $80 billion by 2030. Now, friends, this article actually misses some crucial points. Let me explain what the assumption is in this article, which kind of points to this stupendous exponential increase. So there are certain assumptions to be made. The first assumption is that the current trade war between China and US is going to persist for a long period of time, because no manufacturing is going to shift in a short window of time when everybody will keep speculating that this is a brinkmanship. This is going to bring down, once a favorable trade agreement between China and US is negotiated, the whole thing is going to crumble down and we are going to become back to square one. Unless and until the world sees that China and US is not going to negotiate and they will keep their barriers high, nobody is going to move their manufacturing unit from China to India. Take my word. Not going to happen, because whoever makes investment, they don't make investment in a hurry. They have to look for stability. So the first assumption is that there is going to be a barrier between China and US for perpetuity, at least for 2 years, to make that move. That is an unrealistic assumption to make, because the amount of trade between China is so huge, and if the barrier continues to remain for a long period of time, US economy is going to be severely hit. China is also going to be hit, but US economy is going to be severely hit, and the prices are going to go up and the inflation is going to skyrocket. So this is not going to happen. Let me tell you, this is not going to happen, and the things are going to stabilize pretty soon. And whatever opportunity that we are seeing from the point of view of this trade war between China and US cannot be leveraged, because this is not going to be for a long period of time. So India has to play on its strength. It can't be playing on opportunity, Because that's the mistake we have been doing in past. And even today, if you start talking about this, that India's exports are going to become 10 billion to 80 billion in 2000, we are basically speculating, and this speculating is based on assumptions which are unrealistic in nature. Now, second point. Let's discuss the second point. Now, let's assume that the trade war between China and US persists for a period of 2 years and people start moving from China to India. Let's assume that. Okay, I give it to you. Okay, let's assume that. So, do you think that India is going to reduce their duty structure from China to India? That imports that is going to happen from China to India, will that duty structure is going to become zero from 16.5% to 0% or 0.4%? India is only going to have a free trade agreement or whatever you call it, the BTA, between the bilateral agreement between US and India, just like we have with other countries like Vietnam. So it is going to be a trade agreement between US and India, the free trade agreement or whatever you call it, wants to call it, right? There won't be any agreement between India and China, at least for the time being. Why? Because if we are going to reduce our duty structure on smartphones between between India and China, then all the manufacturing other than Apple, which is happening in our country, most of the low-end Chinese phones which are getting manufactured, they will stop manufacturing in India and they will like to bring their phones directly from China to India because it will make no sense. If your duty is going to become zero here, right, the 16.5% duty between India and China is going to vanish, then why would any Chinese company manufacture in India? To do what? There is no point in manufacturing in India. So this whole path between the whole point about manufacturing in India, as far as the budget phones are concerned, the phones which are not very high end, is going to collapse. And then it will be better to bring phone directly from China to India. Now, the third part of the discussion is that those companies like Apple, who moves from China to India and established a stronger, firmer ground here because of the trade barrier and the exports which are becoming much more costly from China to US, will have another big challenge to deal with. What is the challenge? The challenge is that there is no imports, significant imports happening from US to India as regards components are concerned, as is being discussed here. If you look at this article, it says that India is not importing anything much from India or from US as far as electronics is concerned. If nothing is going to come from US and it is all going to flow from China, and you'll keep the barrier high, not only on smartphone but on components as well, then the cost structure of Apple devices, when they move their manufacturing from China to India, will continue to remain elevated, and it will all depend that how much arbitrage that it is going to get from this unequal, you can say, the trade war, the barrier between the duty between US and China, that barrier and the increased cost structure in India because of the components flowing from outside other than US, from China and the rest of the world where the duty is high. So those are going to have to be factored in when Apple starts manufacturing their phone in India. And that is going to become a barrier, and you have to weigh in that what is the duty differential that you see for phones which will otherwise would have flown from China to US given the tariff structure. So this whole thing is pretty complex. It is not that a simple making a statement that, reciprocal tariff that between US and India is going to basically create a boom for electronic industry. It is not going to happen because there are so many variables. Some variables or some assumptions are extremely unrealistic, hard to carry forward in time. You need to have a trade war between US and China persisting for a long period of time for that transition to take place to India, and India, enabling or making sure that India keeps its tariff hike between China and other parts of the world so as to ensure that people are motivated to make phones and devices in India, right? If you don't keep the barriers high, then nothing is going to happen. Maybe Apple will manufacture in India, but rest of the Chinese manufacturers who are currently manufacturing in India will move back to China and will start dumping phone in India. So this is going to be very, very detrimental. Now you understand that how theoretical this whole paragraph is. This does not stand on foundation, right? So now let's look at what is the current structure. So let me just give you some numbers here so that you can understand. If you go to my website, you will get this chart. This chart talks about for the foreign trade performance analysis leading 25 countries by product. Now, if you look at what I've done is I actually have dropped down through a drop down menu. I have captured here electronic components, electronic instruments, telecom instruments, and what else? Let me just show you what is. So I have only taken electronic part, electronics. So I have got electronic components, electronic instrument, and telecom instruments. So these are electronic things which are getting India is exporting, right? So let's look at the exports. So in FY24, India has exported $10 billion, which is the number here, right, to US. India is also exporting to United Arab Emirates, Netherlands, UK, but these numbers are small compared to what it is doing to US. So US is our definitely a very large market. And probably this number is till November and this might hit the same number here, right? Correct? So this is the situation. So this is clear that US has become a very significant market as far as India is concerned by looking at this chart, because you see how you have grown from there to, and you are going to keep growing. But this is, as I told you, this is all because of the fact that we have been able to inculcate manufacturing in India, but there are certain barriers which we have created. Those barriers are necessary to not just export to US but to other countries as well as for domestic consumption, because we need to have domestic smartphones which are actually of 60 million on a year, and then there are feature phone of 60 million, and our exports are roughly around to 50 million devices, right? If you add everything together in numbers, this is the situation. Now, after having seen this, so let's look at on a country basis. Let's look at from a China point of view. Let me just take China. So if I do China here and see, let's see what we are doing as far as China is concerned, as far as imports are concerned, what we are importing from China. So I think let's do it in this only, because I have import here, and what I am going to do, I'll basically see that so these are the things which we have selected, and you see that how many components, what kind of products, those three things which I talked about, consumer electronic components, electronic instrument. If you add up together, you will see that we are importing from China roughly around $23 billion in FY 2025. See, then we have Hong Kong. Hong Kong can be part of China. So if you add these two together, it is more than 30 billion. 30 billion electronic devices which we are importing from China. And these may be components, mainly components. And our exports to China is not much, because I already showed you that. So, and then we have got Taiwan, which is also a risk, right? You know that, you know what the situation is. Singapore is coming fourth, and then we have got Korea, and then we have US is very, very, very marginal, right? Not much. So look at this. Out of the top 25 countries, if you add together, it is $55.6 billion, out of which China, Hong Kong together is how much? $32 billion. So imagine the kind of imports that are happening. So we have a barrier yet, because we want to slowly migrate towards converting this slowly as the ecosystem shifts in India. We will continue to keep reducing or kind of raising duties on those components which we want to manufacture in India, because it is like from the top to bottom. We started with mobile phone, then we go on to battery, and then there are other components we are raising duties in order to keep the manufacturing, because China is the hub for manufacturing. As soon as we extinguish the barrier between India and China, this whole thing, nothing is going to happen in India. This is going to shoot up. This $32 billion will going to shoot up to maybe $35 billion, or maybe depending upon the value add that we are doing in India. So this is not. So now get back to the story again. So what does this story assume? So this story to me looks like a very, very speculative story. Nothing is going to change. If you ask me, nothing is going to change because this story is highly dependent on the fact that there will be a trade war between US and China will perpetuate for a long period of time. It is not going to happen because of the pain that US consumers are going to feel because of this trade war, and that is going to destroy US economy. Especially the inflation is going to be so high that we are going to have a huge problem, and that is going to have a negative impact on India because as the US inflation increases, the bonds are going to be, all the money which is being poured in Indian market is going to flow out of India, and that is going to go into US bonds because the speculative bond prices are going to become very high because of the expected inflation going very high. So India is going to be negatively impacted because of the trade war between India and China. Now you think that how narrow this headline is. So we don't want a trade war between India, US and China. We are not going to get benefited because it is going to have an adverse impact on India because of the adverse impact on US and US inflation going up. That is going to destroy the US bond market. The yields are going to go up and nobody is going to invest in India because rupee is going to plummet. You understand the situation? It is not good for us. No trade war. So then the summary or the nutshell, takeaway from this article is we cannot be opportunistic. We cannot be opportunistic that, there is a trade war going on between US and China and we start looking at it as we have to grow on fundamentals. We have to grow organically. Nothing is going to happen. There will be no sustained trade war. And if at all that happens, it is going to be detrimental to India. Though, even if there is a change of manufacturing or, things come to India, there will be other damages which will happen to India on account of US inflation going very high. And that is going to create a lot of problems. Friends, that's all for this video. I'm going to stop here and let me know what you think about this. Whether I made some wrong assumptions or anything, which is you feel that otherwise, let me know in the comment section and I'll come back with and thanks for listening, and I'll come back with a new video next time on a new topic. Thank you very much.